Hello everyone, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon Podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode, I want to help you complete an Ironman on a budget, okay? So this does also apply obviously to shorter races as well. At the moment, it's summer in the UK, and lots of people are completing long distance events up and down the country. We had Leeds the weekend just gone. We have Tenby coming up soon, and of course all of these overseas events happening as well. And lots of people are seeing friends, family, colleagues completing these Ironman races and going, wow, what a challenge, what an achievement. I wish I could complete something like that. However, let's not kid ourselves. Ironman is not a cheap sport. You have three sports that you obviously have to participate in: swimming, cycling and running. Neither of which are especially cheap. I mean, running, it can be as expensive as you want it to be. But definitely swimming and cycling, the costs can add up. So I'm going to break down all the costs involved with competing at as well as training for an Ironman. But we're going to try and do it on the minimum budget that we can. Okay, I'm going to try to help you scrimp and save to see what sort of the lowest amount you can reasonably expect to complete a Ironman at is. Now, a quick disclaimer is that I am going to assume that you want to do an official branded Ironman event. This is a big misconception, but Ironman is a company. It's a race organisation sort of business, really. They organise events, they put on fantastic events, they close the roads, the aid stations are really well stocked. There is a great atmosphere. It really pulls in the crowds. They put on the best events in triathlon, just about. Don't get me wrong. However, there are lots of other events out there of the same distance, that 3.8 kilometre swim, 180 kilometre bike and marathon run, which are not Ironman branded. Now, these won't have as many aid stations, they won't be as well stocked. The course would likely be loops. You may find yourself doing up to 8 loops for the full distance, just to make things more manageable for the race directors. You know, it's not the same experience as that full Ironman event. There won't be as many crowds. I guess, you know, if you were picking splitting hairs here, we could say you're not an official Ironman, but if all you want to do is complete that distance. I mean, I've worked with athletes who just wanted to complete that distance in training. They wanted to have a day where they did this, no crowds, no entry fee, it just mattered to them. But most people, they get drawn in by the branding, by the marketing that Ironman do, and they want to do a proper sort of branded Ironman event. That's absolutely fine. But if you are looking to save every single little penny that you can, have a look, because there are lots of other full distance events out there on the calendar that are cheaper. They may be a lot more accessible to you. You might not have to pay for the petrol or train costs or plane tickets. You might not need a hotel if it's especially close to you. You can save a lot of money by finding a local event. But again, we are looking at the costs associated with a full branded Ironman event today. Now, the exact amount that you pay for an Ironman is going to depend on a few things. It's going to depend on where the world you're racing. It sometimes can depend on the popularity of the event, how well established it is, but most importantly, when it is that you buy your entry. Now, Ironman use a tier system where you have tier 1, I believe, where it is the cheapest entries, all the way up to tier 4, which is people who've left it until the last minute to enter. And there can be really quite a significant gap. You could be talking sort of £70-80 between a tier 1 entry and a tier 4 entry. So I can't really give you a hard and fast answer, but I'm going to say for now, £550 I think is probably around about average for most people looking to enter a full distance Ironman. And you know what? This is a lot of cash. I mean, as I said earlier, they put on great events, you know, and I really encourage people to take on this adventure. But also, this isn't the kind of cash that you can just, well, most people can just spend and hope that things turn out okay. It's a big investment, and it's obviously a huge investment in time training, and it's an awful lot of money to spend if you then don't take the training seriously and you end up failing to finish because you got complacent, because you didn't realize how hard it would be, because you wanted to get your head down, you wanted to do it all yourself, you didn't want anyone's help. These are expensive mistakes to make when you pay that much for the race entry, but that kind of 550 mark is where it is we're going to do the rest of our calculations from. Next up, we're going to go through the sports in order. So let's start with swimming and look at the costs associating with being able to complete a 3.8 kilometre swim. That's 2.4 miles. Now, there's a good chance, I'd say probably a 90% chance, that your race will be wetsuit legal. And what this means is that the water temperature will be cool enough to allow you to wear a wetsuit. If you are racing in a very warm climate, such as Hawaii or the Mediterranean in summer, the water will simply be too hot to wear a wetsuit. And as a result, you won't be able to wear one in your race. So this way you need to do a bit of research. You need to look at historically, has my event been a wetsuit legal race? If the answer is yes, every single edition, people have been wearing wetsuits, which is the chance with the majority of events out there, you know that you do need to get a wetsuit. I really highly recommend against trying to get by just swimming in a swimming costume, because as you get closer to the event, as you start practicing your open water swimming, you start to realise how cold it is, you start to realise how difficult open water swimming is, and you will want to get a wetsuit. And if you leave it until sort of the start of the early open water season, so we're talking kind of April, May time, you are going to be paying full price for those wetsuits. If you can think ahead, if for instance it's August and you're telling yourself next year I'm going to do an Ironman, this right now, the summer, is a brilliant time to buy a wetsuit, because everybody who is buying one for this season has already bought one. And so all the retailers, all the manufacturers are looking to clear the stock that's left. And you can get some banging discounts on wetsuits. So this is a great time of year to buy one. By the time you get around to sort of January, February, March, it really is, for the most part, the dregs of what was available from last year, which means you're going to have very limited ability to find a wetsuit within a budget that you have in mind, and also in the right size. There might be a great price on it, but if it doesn't fit you, it is going to be an absolute nightmare. It's either going to fill up with water and drag you down and make you feel like you're sinking, because, well, you will be to an extent. But also, if you have a wetsuit that's too tight, you simply won't be able to breathe. Okay, so it's really important you get the right wetsuit for you. Now, full triathlon wetsuits start at around about, I think these days, sort of the 170 to 200 pound mark. I do recommend against going anything much cheaper. It's not going to be very flexible at all in the shoulders. I know that there are some brands out there that aren't really sort of triathlon or swimming brands, the likes of Decathlon, that do their own wetsuits, but I've had clients use them in the past and they've all gone on to buy themselves a proper triathlon wetsuit in a very short period of time, and talked about how it's night and day. And they wish they hadn't actually spent the money on the cheap swimming wetsuit, because they were always going to end up with that full triathlon wetsuit anyway. Now, it's one thing using one of these cheap wetsuits if you are just doing a sprint, if you're dipping your toes in triathlon, open water swimming, that's absolutely fine. But if you're going to be out swimming 3.8 kilometres, you're going to be in this wetsuit for at least an hour, maybe even over 2 hours, okay? It needs to fit snugly, it needs to be flexible, you need to feel good in this wetsuit. I really would advise against pinching pennies when you're looking at your wetsuit. But one way that you can keep costs down is you could get yourself a sleeveless wetsuit. Now, because a lot of the technology in the manufacturing and the materials in a wetsuit really goes into the shoulders. If you eliminate those, if you just have, if your shoulders are sticking out of the wetsuit, as it were, if it runs down sort of your armpits, the wetsuit ends there, you can save yourself a decent amount of money. You still get, some thermal benefits because the water is being trapped against you. Wetsuits work basically by trapping a thin layer of water against your skin, and then your body will warm that water up to body temperature. So you're swimming in a bit of a cocoon of warm water, especially as you exercise and heat up. If you have you will get this effect from having a sleeveless wetsuit. However, it is going to be notably colder than a full wetsuit when you are swimming in it. And again, I don't want this to be seen as a bit of a false economy, Oh, I can save myself 50 quid by going for a sleeveless wetsuit. But if you find that it's just too cold for you to swim in, then you're going to have to go out and then you have to shell out for a full wetsuit. So again, I'm going to let you make your own decisions here, but I would recommend get yourself a reasonably priced, just cheap wetsuit, but from a triathlon brand such as Orca, Zone 3, 2XU, Hoob. Okay, these are really good places to start. And again, obviously I can't force you to do anything. I'm not going to force you, but of the areas that we can look to scrimp and save in, this probably isn't one of them. Next up is goggles. Now these don't need to be anything fancy. You can get some ridiculously over-the-top goggles that project your swim pace onto the goggle screen for you. You can get some which will change from a clear lens to a dark lens depending on the level of sunlight. You don't need this. What you need is a pair of open water swim goggles. So they need to be nice and wide when they sit on your face, not little socket goggles like kids wear. These need to be good open water goggles with a good seal on them that will allow you a wide range of vision so you can see what's going on around you. But you don't really need to be paying much more than £20-25 for these. Now you will need to buy probably at least 2 pairs when you're training for an Ironman because they are kind of consumable items, and as much as anything I don't want you lining up at the start line of your Ironman with goggles that are so worn and fogged up that you can't really see out of. But again, don't feel the need to slash your cash here. You can get something for around about 20 quid that should do you just about fine. Obviously have a look in the sales, but the most important thing here is fit, and unfortunately it can be a little bit expensive because as soon as you wear some goggles to see if they fit and discover whether they leak or not, you cannot then return those goggles. So if you can try them on the shop, see how they sit on your face, that would be fantastic. You will need a swimming costume as well. So this could either be, for the gents, it could be Speedos, it could be jammers, which are ones that come down to just above your knee, which most people wear. I really recommend against anything baggy. Now this is how I started out in triathlon. I was just doing heads up breaststroke with baggy swim shorts. And it's horribly inefficient. And it can make you feel a little bit self-conscious, putting on something that's tight-fitting, especially if you're not especially sort of comfortable with your body. But it's going to be so much faster. It's one of those things that you may start out wearing something baggy. I mean, if you have something baggy to start with, that's absolutely fine. But it will only be a matter of time before you start to really feel them slowing you and watching everybody go past in their tighter-fitting swimwear and swimming so much faster for less effort before you think, you know what, I'm ready for this. Now, for the ladies, all the same principles apply. You could get yourself a one-piece, or you could get yourself a two-piece with tops and bottoms. Again, it doesn't make an enormous difference, but most triathletes that I see do opt for that one-piece suit in the pool, I should say. Men's swimming costumes are often cheaper, if not always cheaper, than women's, simply due to, they're using a fraction of the materials. But I would recommend you pay around about that £15-20 mark. It doesn't need to be anything special, but it does need to be something long lasting. Chlorine does degrade your swimwear over time, and you don't want it to become see-through between now and the end of this training journey. Now, during Ironman events, you have to wear a swim hat. Okay, it's part of the rules. If you do not wear a swimmer hat, you'll be disqualified. So it's a good idea to get used to wearing a swim hat in training. Now, if you've done other triathlons in the past, or swimming events, you will no doubt have a pile of swimming hats. If you haven't, I recommend getting yourself one. I mean, £5-7, something like that will cover you. They'll make you faster because they give that streamlined effect. They won't keep your hair dry, I'm afraid. They are simply there for the streamlining, really. But it's a good chance to get used to it in the pool because you don't want to put one on race day, not know how to put it on properly. Gives you a headache. You know, again, we just want to try to get used to as much as we can in training. And if you are swimming in open water, they are required by open water venues so that they can see you more easily. I also recommend you look at what we call pool toys. And now these are fins, little flippers that go on your feet. They are pool buoys, pieces of foam that sit between your legs and lift your legs up. Hand paddles, which allow you to generate more sort of force through the water. Okay, these are really useful for helping improve your swim technique. And again, unless you are a really experienced swimmer, I recommend you look at these because they are just, you know, they can make such a difference to your swimming. And you could say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to get these, I'm not going to do the drills, I'm going to skip them, I'm just going to swim. But you are not going to reach your potential. You're going to use a lot more energy than you need to in the swim, and you come out more tired and having taken more time. So I do recommend you look at these. Now, by the time you look at, you know, the fins, pool buoy and paddles, you can be looking at sort of £60, £70 in some cases. Obviously, shop around, see what you can get in the sales, see what you can get that's a bit cheaper. But with the fins, it is important to get your own size, so you can be a little bit restricted there. But again, this is one of the areas that, you know, it's not an absolute bona fide essential. But when you consider how much money you're already spending on your triathlon, and the amount of effort and time and all that's going into this huge journey, okay, these will make a massive difference to your stroke, and I really highly recommend them. Last of the major swimming expenses is the pool fees themselves, as well as open water. It is paying to attend a swimming pool regularly. Now, I recommend that if you can, you find a leisure centre, a health club, whatever it is, that you pay a monthly fee to, and you can swim as much as you like. Because what you want to avoid is thinking, oh, well, I know I should do that second swim, but, you know, I'm trying to keep the costs down, and, you know, and you talk yourself out of doing the training that you need to do to try and save a few quid. And look, I completely understand the financial pressures that come with triathlon, but you really, you know, you, like I've already said already, you're investing so much, you can't afford to skimp on the training you should be doing because you've opted for a pay-as-you-go pool instead of a membership one. Now, a lot of membership pools you can only be paying sort of £40, £50 a month for, which as long as you swim in it sort of 3 times a month or so, you normally come close to getting your money back. So again, I highly recommend these so that you can go swimming as much as you like without having to worry about the cost. And if they have a gym that's included in that, all the better. And if we work on the average of a gym charging around about £50 a month for access to the pool, then somebody who is spending sort of 10 months training for an Ironman would have to budget £500 for pool fees there. Please don't think, oh, you know what, I'll just start swimming 6 months out, I'll be fine, because there's a good chance you won't. Unless you're a really strong swimmer, club swimmer who is used to swimming 3,000, 4,000 meters in training, okay, you need time in the water, and you cannot afford to be sort of stingy on that because of financial reasons, because it will nearly always be cheaper to go for this membership. Now, if we add up all the costs, if we're looking at £200-ish for a wetsuit, £20 for goggles, £20 for a swimming costume, £5 for a swimming hat, £70 for pool toys, and £500 for pool fees, we're already looking around about £900. It's a lot of money, isn't it? And I just want you to go into this with your eyes open. And of course, this is spread out over several months, but just to help you understand what's involved. And this really is, you know, sort of the bare minimum that you need to get through. If somebody came to me with a lot more money, that they could throw at different bits of equipment, sure, absolutely. I mean, some wetsuits out there are close to £1,000 on their own. But before we even really got to the expensive bit of the bike, we're already looking at £900. And unfortunately, there is no getting around the fact that cycling is an expensive sport. Now, if we are looking to keep the cost as low as possible, I'm going to assume that you are looking at second-hand bikes. Now, the issue that I have with second-hand bikes is that you don't know their history. You don't know if they... I mean, it may be the person selling you the bike doesn't actually know that the forks are cracked or the frame is damaged or the handlebars are about to snap while you're riding. You know, there's very little in the way of sort of checks that we can do. You can, after you buy a second-hand bike, send it to a bike mechanic, ask them to give it the one over for a fee, of course. Give it the once over and let them know what it is that you're looking for from the bike and whether they think that it will be up to scratch. They might be able to spot a crack or a safety flaw in time. However, you don't have a warranty, you're not covered by any of the brand protection. If you did want to get a new bike that came with a warranty and that you knew was going to be safe, I recommend spending around about the £700 mark. If you're looking on the second-hand market, I mean, sort of at least £250, £300 is what you want to be spending. However, a warning here is that I highly recommend against you buying a Halford Special sort of £200 road bike. I bought one when I was in London. I already had a good road bike that I used for training and racing, and I wanted one to commute around London in, something that I could lock up, and that obviously I'd be really upset if it got stolen, but I would not be devastated that my racing bike got nicked. So I got it for sort of £200, £250 I think it was, and I rode it around, and it was fine. But all of the components were clearly very cheap. And one by one, they all just started to fail. The shifting got really sluggish. Changed the cables, it's still really sluggish. It's an issue with the shifter. The chain kept dropping. The wheels were buckling. You know, and I would go and I would tighten all these bits up. I'm pretty good as a bike mechanic, if I say so myself. Did my best to keep this thing going, but I just ended up having to pour so much money into it to try to keep it going. The thing was a complete false economy. It's like buying a sort of a £200-300 car. You know the amount of money you have to pour into that car to keep it roadworthy, to get it through its MOT, to pay for breakdowns. It's just, you are throwing good money after bad. So I really do recommend against getting a sort of a really cheap road bike. Now, if we are looking at sort of other bikes, I believe that mountain bikes are banned at all Ironman races. So if you have a mountain bike you're planning to race on, which would be slightly strange given the fact how sort of slow they are on the road, but some people might. You think, I can stick some slick tyres on them. No, I'm afraid you can't. That doesn't fly. You can use other types of bikes, though, I believe. Gravel bikes, hybrid bikes, obviously sort of time trial and triathlon bikes, as well as your standard road bike with the dropped handlebars. You may need to invest in another bike. It may be that you have something that you're already, pretty comfortable with. Now, I think, honestly, from where I am at least, I try to think of myself as a relatively sort of sensible person when it comes to money. If I was, just entering my first sprint or Olympic distance triathlon, then using a hybrid bike or a gravel bike or something that's not designed for riding on the road would be absolutely fine. Because it's an adventure, it's my first race, I'm not worried about speed, I just want to get round. However, if we've already invested £550 into our entry fee and all of the associated costs that we're going to go through, is it really worth trying to save that bit of money to go on a bike that is significantly heavier, that doesn't roll nearly as well because of the tyres, and is just not cut out for the job? Do you really want to fail to complete an Ironman because you tried to save a bit of money on the bike? And this isn't an advert to spend loads of money on a bike, okay? You don't need to. I have, finished on podiums. I have done really well for myself in the past on simply a road bike, okay? Just a standard road bike, not a fancy time trial bike, not a triathlon bike, just your bog standard road bike, even without clip-on aero bars on it. I've done really well for myself, and I know that you can too. But if you do go for something that's not a road bike, you are just shooting yourself in the foot, and you are increasing the chances of you failing to finish, especially if you are taking on a race that is hilly. You will also need a helmet. You will require one of these for race day, so you might as well get one and train with it, okay? I don't know you, but I am concerned about you and your safety if you're going to be out there training, alright? Especially when we're on road bikes, we're riding on the road, we're not in control of everything happening around us, we're going quite fast. You know, it's just there is no good reason not to wear a helmet. Now, when you buy a helmet, the more expensive ones do not offer you more protection, okay? The more expensive ones are lighter, they're more aerodynamic, which makes them faster, better ventilated perhaps, depending on the model, but they are not inherently safer for the most part. There are certain brands that have sort of different systems they put in the helmets that are supposed to help with certain impacts, but broadly speaking, you can probably get away with spending around about kind of £100 on a helmet. If you go cheaper than £100, you can of course get some really basic helmets for about sort of £20-30, but it will feel like you're wearing a giant piece of foam on your head. Whereas if you get yourself a nice road helmet, you won't even know that you're wearing it. It should feel that comfortable. And when you do buy a helmet, make sure you try them on first, okay? Certain brands, such as Specialized, are designed for people like myself with a slightly more elongated skull, whereas you have other brands out there like Kask, which are better suited for people who have slightly rounder heads. A helmet should be comfortable, it should be light, you should not feel like you're wearing it, and if you have one that just doesn't fit very well, it won't provide the maximum amount of protection in a crash anyway. Next up, we've got lights. So I really recommend that you get yourself a set of lights, even if you don't plan on riding in the dark. You never know when you might end up in the dark unexpectedly or in really heavy rain, and you might want to switch those on. And additionally, like the vast majority of cyclists these days, they have flashing front and rear lights because it just gets the attention of drivers. There are a number of drivers who don't really sort of recognise cyclists and think about how to overtake them. They almost do it subconsciously. But if you have those lights, that makes it much more likely the driver's going to acknowledge you and come up with a plan in their head of how to pass you safely. So I highly recommend you get yourself a set of lights. They're not super expensive. I'm going to say about £50 should get you a set of small flashing lights that will allow you to be seen. They won't allow you to see the road in front of you. You need to spend more money if you want to get what we call seeing lights that allow you to see the road in front of you illuminated. But unless you're doing a lot of ride outdoors at night or during winter when it tends to get dark sooner, I think getting you can just spend 50 quid on a pair of, sort of city flashers really, and that should do you just fine. If you are putting in hundreds if not thousands of miles in training, you need to be comfortable. You can't get away with just wearing sort of some cargo shorts and a t-shirt on the bike. You're going to overheat. It's going to be really uncomfortable for you sitting on that saddle. What you need is some cycling kit. And a lot of people are reluctant about this because they swore they'd never wear Lycra when they started out cycling. Well, about 90% of people who say that end up wearing Lycra because it's just so comfortable. There's a reason that people wear it. It's well ventilated, it stops them sweating so much, and it just allows them to spend longer on the bike. The reason for this is there is a pad in the cycling shorts called a chamois. And some people say it can feel a bit like wearing a nappy. I guess they're not completely wrong. But the idea is that when you sit on one of these hard road cycling saddles, that it cushions that saddle for you. Now, the reason we do it that way, instead of having a really big soft saddle, is because the way that the pressure develops, it develops a lot less pressure when you're wearing padded shorts as opposed to a padded saddle. So it really is infinitely more comfortable. There is a reason why every single road cyclist has padded shorts. Well, just about every single road cyclist has padded shorts and a hard saddle because it is comfortable. I see people who are starting out in the sport asking for a really soft saddle. Where can they get the widest, softest one? It just isn't conclusive to long-term comfort. The way I try to explain it to people is, how sometimes you will go into a pub or a bar and they have these really big sofas that you can sit in. And it feels amazing to start with, and you sink into that sofa. Then you find yourself sort of shifting about a bit because you're starting to sort of feel the pressure on different parts of your body, and you're moving around to keep comfortable, and then leaning forwards, and you find yourself shifting around a fair bit. Whereas if you sit on a hard bar stool, you could perch on the end of that all night without any problems. Now, cycling kit is one of those areas where you get what you pay for. With regards to cycling shorts, you can probably get a basic pair for around about sort of £70, and then about sort of £40 for a cycle jersey. The shorts are more expensive because of the chamois and the technology in them. And I do also recommend bib shorts, which are shorts which are held in not by a waistband, but by these hoops, as it were, sort of straps that go over your shoulders. And that holds the shorts in place, which means you have less pressure on your waist. It does make going to the toilet a bit harder, but not dramatically so, or as much as some people would have you believe. So yeah, I recommend you allow about £120 budget roughly for each cycling kit that you want. You could get away with just one if you want to be really on top of the laundry. But most people will have at least two that they can rotate, because if you have two bike rides back to back in a row, then that can be an issue. And when you are training for Ironman, you are going to put in some really big days, some double sessions, and days where you're going to be sort of cycling 2 days in a row, and you might not be able to get the clothing dry in time because you can't tumble dry them. This figure will go up when you start looking at things like socks and gloves and buffs. These are all additional bits of clothing, overshoes that we can wear to get more comfortable on the bike. The shorts and the jersey are brilliant for the hot weather, but as soon as it gets a bit nippy, you might want an all-weather jersey, you might want a gilet to keep the wind off you. There are all sorts of bits that you can buy to keep yourself comfortable in all weathers on the bike, but we are going to stick with £120 just for that simple summer kit. But if you're going to be training through the winter, that will be higher. If you're training through the winter, in the vast majority of countries at least, you are going to want something called a turbo trainer, and this is a device that allows you to train indoors. So you hook your bike up to it. These were all the rage in the COVID pandemic. Take the rear wheel off your bike, stick it onto the turbo trainer, and that will allow you to ride your bike indoors. It provides resistance. It allows you to ride without having to worry about traffic. It will measure your power so you can see how hard it is that you're pushing. You can use software that will allow you to it simulates hills and virtual worlds for you. You can race. It is a really good investment. It makes cycling really interactive in bad weather. It is much more appealing in February when it's 2 degrees and it's raining sideways to hop on the turbo trainer and get a really good session in, then spend 50 minutes bundling up ahead of your ride, getting everything all sorted out, then coming back from the ride, washing the bike, all of this, and not to mention the numb hands you get when you're out there. So I really do recommend a turbo trainer, and you will be looking, if you want to get yourself a good, what we call direct drive turbo trainer, where you remove the rear wheel, I'm going to say £350 is about the minimum you want to spend. Again, you can get some second hand, but these are a absolutely massively beneficial training tool for triathletes, and I really would recommend against trying to train through the winter without one. If you are taking on a late season race that isn't until September, maybe August, September, you may be able to do all of your training outside. That's absolutely fine. But if you are starting your journey a long way out and you want to get some good quality structured training done indoors, turbo trainers are an absolute must. Something else I'm going to really heavily recommend you do is upgrade your tyres. The reason being, if you spend a bit more on your tyres, they will be more resistant to punctures, they'll be grippier, so you run less risk of crashing, and they're also going to roll more nicely on the roads, making you faster. When you're looking at around about £40–50 for a good quality tyre, looking about £80 to upgrade both. This is just, I mean, obviously you could get by on the tyres that came with your cheap bike, but if you find yourself failing to finish a race because you got a puncture that you either couldn't fix, struggled to fix, you're going to feel a little bit silly. So I highly recommend you get yourself some good quality tyres. They don't need to be the absolute most expensive out there. Go into a bike shop, chat to people, see what other people are riding with, but get yourself some good quality tyres because this could save your race day. You will also need to get bottles for your bike. You'll also need cages to put the bottles in. Allow around about £30 for this, give or take. We're also going to want to make sure that we have tools so that we can fix our bike, both tools that we take out with us, such as a multi-tool with different bits on it that we can use to fix various bits on our bike that break, tighten things up and the like, or loosen them off, as well as having some tools at home. So we are going to need to do some basic bike maintenance ourselves. It doesn't have to be a case of being able to strip a bike right back and being able to rebuild it, but getting some tie levers, getting a good set of Allen keys or hex keys, getting a chain splitter tool to allow you to change the chain, and probably getting a bike stand to allow you to do maintenance work on the bike, as well as a brush for cleaning, degreaser, bike cleaner. These are all pretty important things. A cassette tool as well, and a chain whip to allow you to change your cassette. These, again, you don't have to get them, but the money that you try to save on these is money you probably just end up giving to your mechanic anytime something goes vaguely wrong. And I recommend, we can allow ourselves around about £100 budget for these if we just get the bare necessities. And unfortunately, bikes don't last forever. Certain parts wear out and need to be replaced. So we're going to need to replace our chain at least once, probably twice, when we are doing our IRONMAN training, because the amount of miles that we're going to be putting in, the less we clean the bike, the more often we'll have to check the chain. And now if you head back to one of the early episodes on bike maintenance with Lee Williams, he goes into this topic in some detail. But we want to make sure that we are checking our chain for wear and we're replacing it to avoid having to replace our cassette and our chain rings. We're also going to need to replace gear cables and brake cables on our bike. If you are putting it in for a service and paying for all of that, that will come as part of the bill. If you want to do it yourself, between sort of probably a couple of chains and brake cables and gear cables, I'd allow at least sort of £70 for those. And these really aren't things that you can afford to skip, I'm afraid. Now, if you're doing an IRONMAN on a budget, you don't need a cycle computer. You don't need a power meter. You don't need super fancy pedals. Okay? You don't need the latest aero kit. You don't need an aero helmet. Okay? You don't need all of these bits that people try to push on you, try to sell you. Trust me, you don't need them. Just try to keep it simple to what it is that you're realistically going to need to help you complete your training rides without issue and safely, and also get through race day itself. On the subject of cycling though, other expenses to keep in mind are the cost of transporting your bike. So if you are looking to drive with your bike, can it fit in the back of the car? Do you need to get a roof rack? Do you need? Would you prefer to get a rack that sits on the back of the car? Some people put their bikes in trailers. If you are flying with your bike, do you need to get yourself a bike box? Do you need to rent one? These are all costs that need to be included. And a trap that people fall into is they go way over their budget on the bike itself because they think the bike frame is the most important thing. It's not. And then they find themselves way out of control with all of the extra expenses they hadn't foreseen that are suddenly sort of appearing. They get really overwhelmed and can find themselves leaning on the credit cards. So if we're looking at £250 for a bike, £100 for a helmet, 50 for lights, 30 for cages and bottles, 120 for just sort of one cycling kit, 100 quid for some new tyres, £300 for a turbo trainer, give or take, £100 for tools, about 70 quid for chains and cables. Before we're looking at anything else, we're already looking at the best part of £1,000, guys. Which, in addition to sort of the £900 that we got from the swimming, we're already looking at £2,000 to get the bits that we need before we've even looked at our race entry. The good news is, running's a lot cheaper. The main thing you need for running is shoes. And I recommend that for an Ironman, you probably have a shoe budget of between sort of £300 to £400, because chances are you're going to need at least 3 pairs of shoes for your training, because they're going to wear out, and this is going to increase the risk of injury. And working out when your shoes need replacing is a bit of an art form, but look at the wear on the soles, see how the material in the shoes holding up, see how they feel relative to when they were new, and this should help you make a decision of when to choose. But if not, I mean, the industry recommendation is around about 500 kilometers, but it does depend on your weight, on the kind of shoe you're running in, and all other manners of factors. But especially if you start to pick up a little bit of a niggle, a little bit of an injury in there, then that is a good reason to get some replacement shoes. So about £300 to £400 for most people for sort of relatively basic running shoes. I would recommend against just running in some basic gym shoes. This may not give you the support that you need. It does increase the risk of injury. Clothing is quite affordable, looking at probably about 50 quid for some shorts, maybe a couple of pairs of running t-shirts. You can keep it simple for the most part of the year. You might want to get a long sleeve training jacket. You might want to get just a long sleeve running top. You might want to get gloves, a running hat, all of these extras you can look at. But again, if we are trying to keep costs down as much as possible, if we're just training through the summer, shorts and t-shirt should get you most of the way. And the last thing that we're really looking at that I'm going to cover within running, because a lot of people do, is a watch. So I highly recommend triathletes get some kind of watch to track their training. If you already have an Apple Watch, this will be absolutely fine. If you have something like a Fitbit, most of these really aren't designed for athletes to wear. Again, you can give it a go, see how you get on with them, but they are a bit of a pain in the arse, if I'm honest. So you might want to look at getting something triathlon specific. Now, don't feel the need to go for something really over the top. All you're really looking for is something with a run mode, cycle mode, and a swim mode. Ideally, that has a heart rate monitor built into it. Most of them do these days, and that should do you just fine. I reckon sort of £200 should get you a reasonable sort of entry-level triathlon watch. Which once we go, okay, let's be conservative, let's say £400 for the shoes, 50 quid for the clothing, we're looking at £650 for the running. So again, still a lot of cash, but it's not nearly as much as all the other stuff. Now there is two final disciplines that we cannot fail to ignore. And the first one I'm going to touch on is strength training, because if you just start putting in all the volume required for an Ironman without the foundational strength, you're going to get injured. And it's really common where people start training for these kinds of events from nothing. They build up the volume, build up the volume, and something goes ping, or a knee goes ouch. There's all sorts of issues that can occur, which are often from a combination of sort of weak glutes, a weak posterior chain, so sort of your hamstrings, calves and glutes, over tightness in other muscles, and strength training is the single best way to get around this. Now, strength training can be really intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. I have an introduction to strength and conditioning program for triathletes where you can start out, if you want, just at home doing bodyweight exercises on your own without any equipment, okay? And this vastly reduces the risk of injury. Now, obviously, you don't have to do this, and if you are looking to save as much money as possible, just doing exercises at home with no equipment is the way to go about it. If your swim membership includes a gym, that's absolutely perfect. Take advantage of that. Please do. But I want to get away from the idea that, strength and conditioning is a good place where you can save. You can be looking at as little as sort of £15-20 in some cases for a gym membership. And the amount of benefit that will bring to your performance and your ability to train and be injury free is enormous. Because again, I don't want you to pick up an injury a couple of months out from your race and be unable to compete, especially if you've been training for months on end living up to this and you suddenly develop plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendinopathy, anything like that. Okay, we can't afford to leave ourselves open to anything like this unnecessarily. Next up, we have sports nutrition. Now, sports nutrition can be incredibly expensive. If you want to use gels, if you want to use energy bars, if you want to use these pre-packaged products, then that is the most efficient way to get round a course because of how densely calorific they are. If you don't have much space on your bike, sticking some energy gels on your bike is going to be an awful lot better than lugging around the equivalent calories in any other form. However, you are looking at, around about £1 each for these energy products. And given the fact that you have to get used to using these products in training, you could be looking at spending several £100s on bars, gels, chews, energy drinks. So, I'm going to take a bit of time here to explain how you can get some really cheap sports nutrition. First up is carb drinks. Now, most athletes, they will have bottles that they will fill up with water and they will add a carb mix in. And when they say carb mix, what they're really talking about is a sugar drink. Sugar is a carbohydrate and they are using a flavoured sort of sugar at a certain concentration within the within the bottle, and they're mixing it all together. And there are other bits in there as well. It's not simply sugar, but that is what most people are doing. And we can get around this, we can make it a lot cheaper for ourselves by simply getting some caster sugar and putting it inside a bottle of water and giving it a shake. Now, it isn't going to taste as nice, it is going to taste a little bit different. If you really don't like the fact that it has zero flavour, you could try adding some squash in there, maybe some concentrated squash. That may work as well. But we are essentially, it's essentially sugar water that we're drinking. Again, it is at a specific sugar content, and you will have to experiment with your homemade energy drinks, and you'll have to make sure that the consistency is the same with every drink. So you have to measure it out carefully with a measuring spoon or something similar to make sure that you're consistent and you know how much it is that you can stomach. But this is a really good way to save money on, not needing to sort of drop 30-40 quid on what's essentially, a big tub of flavoured sugar in many cases. Something else people talk about the benefits of are electrolytes. And these sound really fancy, don't they? Oh, electrolytes, yeah, I need some of them. Well, you do, but the vast majority of it is just sodium. It is simply salt. And you can see if you get on with it. Just getting a bottle of water, adding some salt to it. Again, do your own research, find out how much, an experiment, how much salt it is that you need to replace. It depends on how heavy a sweater you are. It depends on how much salt is in your sweat. I'll drop down in the link an affiliate link to Precision Fuel and Hydration. We can take their test and you can then get some results which will help influence how much salt it is that you need to take on. Now, to offset the the salt water, you can squeeze a lemon in there as well to take the edge off the taste, and that you have there a very affordable electrolyte drink. Energy gels are a very concentrated source of sugar, sort of a gelatinous texture, which we can use to give us a real energy kick. But you know what else is a gelatinous source of sugar? Sweets. a lot of athletes, especially longer distance athletes, they can get by on a bag of Haribo or some jelly babies or whatever their choice is. Okay, now this won't be quite as concentrated a source of energy. You might need to carry more with you in this situation, but you can definitely get by on at least some of your rides just with a big bag of Haribo. And you get one bag of Haribo for about the cost of an energy gel in most cases. So this is definitely worth your consideration. Now, with these cheaper options that I've given you, they are a great way to save money when you're training. However, on race day, you are not going to be able to mix up your own energy drink on the go on the bike. And you're not going to be able to carry 7 bags of Haribo around with you to meet your energy requirements. What you're going to be using, ideally, is the on-course nutrition. Now, these are products that IRONMAN provide at the aid stations. They are energy bars, energy gels, energy drinks, other snacks that they have there, bananas and the like. You need to try using these in your training. I recommend grabbing yourself a taster pack that that will come as part of sort of your entry offer. You probably get a very reasonable pack of sort of about 5 or 6 gels, maybe some samples of their energy drink. You may need to pay for them, or they may be willing to send them to you if they're giving you details. But try these in your training, even if you don't use them for every ride. Try them in your training so you can work out whether they work for you or not. Because if you're going to be on race day, you cannot carry 7 bags of Haribo or all these bottles of pre-made drink mix with you. You're going to need to be refueling, grabbing stuff on the go. And a good way to go about that is to use the free food given out by IRONMAN. But you can't afford to train on your homebrew sports nutrition and then suddenly switch to these products on race day in case they give you gastrointestinal upset. So give them a spin on just a couple of training rides, see if they work for you and whether you can use them on race day without issue. And in addition to all of these, there is of course the ubiquitous flapjack, homemade energy bar, all of these recipes that you can find where you can create your own sports nutrition products simply with real food. We're not even trying to emulate stuff that's on the course necessarily. We are simply just trying to find some food that we can eat to help fill us up. People can also go for Sori malt loaf. I used Jamaica ginger cake during my first Ironman, and the longer that you're out there for, the sort of more important it becomes, in my opinion, to at least include some real food in your diet. So well and good if you're a professional out there for 8 hours and you're getting by on sugar all day. But if you're going to be out there for 17, okay, you need to make sure that you're not just relying on gels, because chances are you won't be able to stomach any more sugar by the time you get to about 100 miles into the bike. As you can probably tell, sports nutrition is an absolute minefield, and working out what it is that you should be eating on race day takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of trial and error to find out how many grams of carbohydrate you can consume. How can you carry them on the bike? What should you have for breakfast on race morning? Because if you get your nutrition strategy wrong during an Ironman event, you will pay for that mistake with hours added onto your time. Okay, it really is that bad. Whether it's a case that you're crashing because you have not eaten enough food, whether you find yourself, with nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, stomach cramps, constipation, all of these issues are completely going to derail your race. It's something a lot of people don't consider, which is why I've put together a complete guide to triathlon race day nutrition to help athletes understand the principles behind this and create their own fueling plan. Now, it's really difficult, I'm going to say impossible actually, for me to create a sort of a cost for this nutrition. It really is going to depend on the way that you approach it. So I'm just going to have to say, look, it's going to be a big old question mark here. You're just going to have to allow this depending on the method that you use. It could be that you do go for some sports nutrition products. It could be that you simply go for sugary drinks. Again, I don't want to give you a figure that's too low. I don't want to give you a figure that's too high. It's all so personal. So here we go. I have £900 for swimming, £1,000 for cycling, £750 for running, and a £550 entry fee. This has brought us to a total of £3,200 to complete an Ironman, and that's not including travel. That is not including any accommodation. That is not including any nutrition, because remember we left that one blank. As I'm sure you can appreciate, this isn't the cheapest endeavour. Now, it could be that you already own a lot of this stuff. It could be you already have a decent road bike and all the gear. Great, knock £1,000 off of that total. It could be that you've done loads of running. Great, fantastic. You probably don't need to spend quite as much there. Okay, this is sort of based on somebody who's done none of these three sports from scratch. So this number may be lower for you. I'm just trying to prepare you so you can go into this with your eyes wide open. That you don't persuade your other half or yourself, oh, you know what, it's only going to be like £1,500, and we'll be able to make it. You will not be able to finish an Ironman on a budget of £1,500 from scratch, I'm afraid. If you have all of the triathlon equipment available, if you have everything from doing shorter races, and you are entering a local Ironman distance event, and it's an off-brand event, it may only cost you £250. So it really does depend on how much equipment you have already and where you are in your triathlon journey. Speaking of a triathlon journey, I don't generally recommend that somebody starts from scratch and goes up to a full Ironman within a year. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are people who are incredibly fit, who are fantastic cyclists and runners who just want to add in swimming. Okay, this can be very different. It could be there are people who have a lot of money, who have a lot of time and can hire someone like me on a bespoke basis to really help supercharge their training. Okay, that again is very different. But if we are looking at your average person who's preparing for an Ironman with no experience in any of the three sports, I would much rather you spend a bit of time building up to this Ironman. It could be that you start with an Ironman 70.3 and then you move on to a full Ironman the year after. It could be that you start off doing some sprints and an Olympic one year and then maybe move up to a half the year after that and then a full Ironman. It really is up to you how you spread it out, but I do recommend, look, these races, this distance isn't going anywhere. Okay, I'd rather you really enjoy the process, spread the cost over all of these years, and really enjoy the journey rather than seeing it as, this is going to be my day, this is going to be my one day. Because if it isn't your day, if you miss the bike cut-off, it's an expensive mistake. Well, what is the best way that we can assure that we are going to finish? Well, training, right? It's obvious. If we do the right kind of training, we are setting ourselves up for success. If we are not fumbling through watching YouTube videos of what professional athletes do. Yeah, because, we're like professional athletes really, aren't we? We should train like the pros. No, we shouldn't. We should train like amateurs. People who haven't got all the time in the world to train. We need to know, okay, well, how much time should I be spending in the pool? What should my longest ride be ahead of the Ironman? What kind of running structure can I have to reduce the risk of injury? This is where a training plan comes in. Okay, if you are not following some kind of structured training when you're approaching your Ironman event, your chances of finishing quite low, if I'm honest. Again, I'm not saying they are low like 3-4%, but they may only be around sort of 15-20%. Depends on your background, depends on how well versed you are, how well you understand these things. But if you are listening to this as someone who's never really done much triathlon before, but is thinking, you know what, I want to do an Ironman one day, and it's going to be this year, next year, you really would do yourself a lot of favours by following a structured training plan. Now, one of the reasons that I started coaching was because triathlon changed my life. I was in a really dark place. When I crossed that first triathlon finish line, I felt a huge amount lighter. And when I decided to go into coaching 4 years later, it's because I wanted as many people as possible to share that magic moment. And when I have chatted to all sorts of people from the industry, a business coach that I've worked with, different coaching companies, I've been on a video call with them, and I've talked about, well, I'm looking for ways to help athletes get fit and achieve their goals, but make it accessible, having a low priced option. I can see they have this this bit of like a smirk on their face, like, what a mug, you should be charging people more. And well, yeah, I guess I could, but I really want to keep my training at an accessible level for people who are looking for good quality coaching, but who can't afford anything bespoke. This is why I've put together my first time Ironman bundle. Now, you've already heard me in this podcast reference my introduction to strength training for triathletes. That goes for £50. My Ironman race day nutrition goes for £25. And my Ironman training plans, which go for about £60. Okay? I am bundling all of these together in a high value, low cost package for about £100. I can't give you an exact figure because there are different Ironman training plans, and it is going to depend on which one you go for. And again, I might add more courses in as I start adding them. But you can get your training plan, understand your strength and conditioning, because the strength that's included in the training plan, it's very basic. But you can get a really high quality strength training plan, understand the anatomy with videos of all the exercises, and also help you create a nutrition plan for race day so you can complete your event without throwing up in a bush or sprinting from Portaloo to Portaloo. You can have your training set out in a way that is sustainable, where it's not taking over your life, where you're doing a bit of everything that you need and you're not having to spend hours trawling through all this information on the internet to try to find the best way to train. You can get all this information from myself, strength and conditioning coach, certified nutrition coach, and an Ironman certified coach. Okay, this is all a really nice low cost bundle, so you can get maximum benefit and really help you set out on your road to success. And I know it's another cost, but if you're already spending over £3,000 on an Ironman, if you can get some almost insurance for your physical preparation for less than £100 to know that you're putting yourself in the strongest position possible, could be the smartest money that you spend on the event. I'm going to put it down in the show notes, so have a look in the description of this podcast or this video and it'll be down there for you. I really hope you found this useful. I'm definitely not trying to put people off of the Ironman. Look, there is nothing more that I want than for people to go out there and to achieve their Ironman dreams. I just want to make sure that you're going into it with eyes wide open, so you don't end up finding yourself in debt over this whole adventure because you didn't realise how much it was going to cost you. There are lots of ways you can keep costs down. I mean, triathlon is the kind of sport, you could just throw money at it endlessly and still not get everything that you wanted. But if you are smart with decisions that you make, you can actually do it on a relatively modest budget relative to what some people will tell you that you need to do. I mean, we've looked at that headline figure there, £3,200. Some people will spend that, simply on their bike without any upgrades whatsoever. Okay, so if you're smart, if you're clever, you can make that money go much further. Thank you for your company this week. Really appreciate it. Make sure that you give this podcast a subscribe if you haven't done already. And if you could give me a rating or leave me a little review, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you once again, and I'll see you all next Tuesday morning.